Hello, BookTube. I thought it'd be a nice change of pace if I talked for a minute about uh, books that you can actually go into a bookstore and look at, as opposed to books that are coming out months from now. I have a small selection of things here that I want to recommend to you, so that if you're in a bookstore and you see them on a new release table, you'll know that aside from whatever blurbs may or may not have been solicited for the covers of the books, there's at least one critic out there who wholeheartedly loves them and recommends that you buy them. The first one came out at the end of May. It's not even a June release, but it's so good, and I haven't mentioned it, and I want to. It's called America's Snake by Ted Levin, and it's his natural history of the American timber rattler. He goes through the book is beautifully illustrated throughout. There's two of the creatures mating. He goes through their history, their natural history, their biology, their mating, or whatnot. And he also goes through their anecdotal history, talks to lots of people who've had experiences with timber rattlers. Didn't talk to me, who would have got it very negative. I've been bitten by these things on a couple of occasions. It's not pleasant at all. But the book is brilliant. It's just a brilliant example of natural history writing. So if you like nature, if you like nature writing, swallow what may be your disgust at the subject and just love the book. You won't put it down. Our next one is the first debut novel of two that I want to mention to you today. It's called Each Vagabond by Name. Isn't that a lovely cover? It's by Margo Orlando Littell, and it's the story of a group of strangers that wander into a small town in Pennsylvania. And their presence, they're not malevolent, not necessarily, and their presence there brings all sorts of tensions to life. To the surface among the people who live in that town. And it's not much more complex than that on a plot level, but it's so wonderfully done, just beautifully executed. It's a pattern that I'm hoping applies here, is that this debut novel from a small press, this will almost certainly not be on the new release shelf at a bookstore. You'll have to go and order it, and I urge you to do so. The best pattern would be that this brings this author to the attention of a larger house, and her next book has a release run that dwarfs this one, because this is an author I want to hear more from, and when you finish the book you will too. Our next one is this thing. It's Melville in Love by Michael Shelden, in which he delves into the original records, the letters and whatnot, and sifts out a story that has only been mentioned in outline in other Melville biographies. The story of his dalliance, his affair with a woman named Sarah Morwood, and it's his contention, it's the author's contention, that she liberated Melville's creativity in 1851 and is the muse of his strangest and anybody's strangest book, Moby Dick. The book gives you a wonderful, lively look at the intellectual world of the Berkshires, with Nathaniel Hawthorne, of course, being the famous Melville connection there. But if you're interested in Melville, you absolutely have to read this. But even if you love, obscure and hitherto unknown love stories, discovery stories like that, on one level it's a story of Melville's inspiration, but on another level it's every bit as good a story about historical investigation. So if you see it, I highly recommend it. Our next one is a historical novel. It's Edge of the Fall by Kate Williams. This is her sequel to The Storms of War. She's doing one of those Ken Follett style panoramic, multi-volume historical fiction tours of the 20th century. The first book, the linchpin, was World War I. In this book, the family has survived. Its young ones are, everybody's disillusioned by the war, and the linchpin here is the Roaring Twenties, and it's just sumptuously entertaining. That's what it's meant to be. You will become involved with some of these characters, and you will love the way she works in the events of history, the big signpost events of history, into her story. So if you like that kind of thing, a sweeping historical epic, you can get this. Probably the first one is probably out in paperback by now, and just get them both and gobble them down. Our next one is our next debut novel. It's called The Many Selves of Katherine North by Emma Geen. And it is a story of a young woman who is a phenomenaut. She works for a giant and semi-malevolent tech company that sends human consciousnesses into the bodies of animals. And those people who voyage into the sensory realm of another species are called phenomenauts. And the author builds on that premise with half of it is girl with dragon tattoo style, rough-edged action and sharp dialogue, and the other half of it is surprisingly deep meditation on what it is to be human and what it is to be inhuman. And I can't recommend it high enough. It's you have to be in the right mood for it. It's not on some levels not a challenging novel. On other levels it's very thought-provoking. It's it's a bit strange. It's what I'm fumbling to say here. So if you see it and you're intrigued, give it a try. Or at the library, another perfect way to sample it. And our last one is a Steve book. It's Commander-in-Chief by Nigel Hamilton. This is his follow-up to The Mantle of Command. In the first book, he talks about Franklin Delano Roosevelt taking command of the U.S. Armed Forces and then the Allied forces in World War II. And this book is about the tempests of that command, especially his ongoing fights with Winston Churchill. And once again, original records have been sifted in order to and shifted around in order to throw emphasis on a kind of story that hasn't been told that often. It's been told before, but nobody writes like Nigel Hamilton. So you're going to get a very entertaining story anyway, even if all the details are familiar to you. But I'd be willing to bet that some of them won't be. The rivalry between Churchill and FDR was largely suppressed in British histories, including Churchill's own. But the story is fascinating. These two strong-willed men have very different ideas about how to prosecute the war. And what they want to be left standing when the war is over. If you're a history buff, a World War II buff, I highly recommend it. If you see it on a Barnes & Noble table, I really doubt that it will disappoint you. And there you go. That's just a handful of new books. I thought I might try out a feature along the lines of Last Week in Books, so that occasionally we're talking about things you can actually buy. So I'll try this again next week, and we'll see what comes out then. In the meantime, thank you, BookTube.